The elevator doors whispered shut behind her. 30 floors of pristine marble stretched ahead, empty except for one man and his janitor's cart. Cassandra Blake's stilettos carved a rhythm against the stone as she approached, her Armani blazer pristine as winter frost. Ryan Hayes didn't look up from the puddle he was mopping, his movements methodical, almost military in their precision. The scent of industrial bleach mingled with her Tom Ford perfume, a collision of worlds that shouldn't meet. She stopped inches from his worn boots, close enough to see the silver threading through his dark hair. "Beat me, and I'll marry you," she smirked, the words dripping with silk-wrapped venom. The mop stilled in his hands. When he finally raised his eyes, something ancient and dangerous flickered there, something that transformed the hallway into a battlefield. His weathered security badge caught the overhead light like a medal of honor. "You won't like what happens next." The game had begun, but the rules had just changed. 8 months earlier, Ryan had stood in this same marble lobby, his resume clutched in hands that still trembled from too many sleepless nights. The apartment lease was due in 2 weeks. Tyler's school shoes had holes that let in rain. The savings account showed $17.43, not enough for groceries, let alone dignity. He'd applied for security positions, IT roles, anything that might use his background. But every interview ended the same way, polite smiles that never reached their eyes, promises to call that never came. Blake Technologies had been his last shot. The janitor position paid minimum wage, but it came with health insurance. Tyler needed his asthma medication. Ryan needed to swallow what remained of his pride. He'd expected rejection, had prepared for it even. What he hadn't expected was Cassandra Blake herself stepping into the interview room, her presence filling the space like ice water. "I don't hire people like you," she'd said, her voice cutting through his carefully rehearsed answers. Her fingers had drummed against the glass table, each tap echoing like a gavel. The security clearance forms lay scattered between them, evidence of a life he'd tried to leave behind. She'd glanced at his military service record, and something had shifted in her expression, something that looked almost like recognition. But she'd hired him anyway. The contradiction had puzzled him for months. CEOs didn't typically involve themselves in custodial hiring decisions. Yet here she was, watching him work, finding excuses to walk past his cleaning stations. Always watching, always calculating, as if she was waiting for something. Now, standing in the empty hallway with her challenge hanging between them, Ryan finally understood what she'd been waiting for. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her perfectly composed features. Her smile held the sharp edge of a blade, beautiful and lethal in equal measure. She expected him to back down, to apologize for even looking her in the eye. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and met her gaze head-on. The mop handle felt familiar in his grip, like the weight of weapons he'd once carried in places where hesitation meant death. "What exactly are you proposing?" His voice carried none of the deference she was accustomed to hearing from employees. Cassandra's eyebrows lifted slightly, the only sign of surprise she allowed herself. She pulled out her phone, fingers dancing across the screen with practiced efficiency. "Our cybersecurity system was breached yesterday. Our best IT team has been working around the clock and made zero progress." The words fell like stones into still water. "Fix it in 48 hours and I'll honor my word. Fail, and you're terminated." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered 30 stories below, oblivious to the standoff unfolding in the corporate tower above. Ryan's mind raced through possibilities. A cybersecurity breach at a defense contractor was serious business, the kind of problem that could topple companies and end careers. He thought of Tyler, probably sitting at their kitchen table right now, struggling with homework in the light of their one good lamp. The boy deserved better than hand-me-down clothes and generic cereal. Deserved a father who could provide more than just survival. 48 hours, Ryan repeated, tasting the words. Starting when? Now. Cassandra's smile widened, predatory and pleased. She turned on her heel and walked toward the executive elevator, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm against the marble. Conference room 12. I'll have our IT director brief you on what they've found so far. She paused at the elevator doors, one manicured finger hovering over the call button. Oh, and Hayes? Don't embarrass yourself. The elevator doors closed behind her like the lid of a coffin. Ryan stood alone in the hallway, still gripping his mop handle, while the weight of impossibility settled around his shoulders. He looked down at his uniform, the blue shirt with Blake Technologies embroidered in silver thread, the pants that had seen better decades, the work boots that had carried him through more battles than any man should fight. His reflection stared back from the polished marble floor, fractured and distorted. But beneath the surface he could see traces of the man he used to be. Captain Ryan Hayes, Cyber Operations Specialist, United States Army. The man who'd tracked enemy hackers through digital mazes while mortars fell around his base. The man who'd secured classified networks with the same methodical precision he now applied to mopping floors. Conference room 12 smelled like stale coffee and desperation. 3 IT specialists looked up as he entered, their faces ranging from confused to openly hostile. The youngest one, barely out of college by the look of him, actually laughed. Seriously? They're bringing in the janitor now. His colleagues exchanged glances, the kind that spoke volumes about their opinion of management's latest decision. Ryan ignored the snickers and focused on the wall of monitors displaying lines of code. His trained eye caught patterns immediately, the elegant signature of a sophisticated attack. This wasn't some script kiddie looking for attention. This was professional work, military grade, the kind of breach that made headlines and ended careers. What's the entry point? He asked, pulling up a chair to the main terminal. The specialist stopped laughing. Something in his voice, the quiet authority that came from years of command, made them pause. The oldest one, a woman with silver-streaked hair and tired eyes, gestured to the primary screen. Started in the email system. Spearphishing attack targeting our government contracts division. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting a losing battle for hours. But that was just the opening move. They're deep in our infrastructure now. We can't tell what they've accessed or how far they've penetrated. Ryan studied the attack vectors, his mind automatically cataloging patterns and possibilities. This was sophisticated work, the digital equivalent of a special forces operation. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were looking for. The question was whether they'd found it yet. His fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory older than his custodial career. Code flowed across the screen like a familiar language, one he'd spoken fluently in another life. The room grew quiet around him as the specialists realized they were watching something they didn't expect. This wasn't a janitor stumbling through their domain. This was a professional at work, Hours blurred together. Coffee grew cold in forgotten cups. The specialists gradually stopped questioning his presence and started hanging on his every word. Ryan traced the attack through layers of security, following digital breadcrumbs through a maze designed to confuse and misdirect. But he'd hunted bigger prey in deadlier terrain. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m, a single line of code, buried deep in a subroutine that should have been innocuous. But Ryan recognized the signature, a digital fingerprint he'd seen before in classified briefings. His blood ran cold as the implications hit him. This wasn't random corporate espionage. This was targeted, personal. Someone who knew exactly who Ryan Hayes used to be. He sat back in his chair, the weight of realization settling around him like armor. Across the city, Tyler was sleeping in their small apartment, trusting his father to keep their fragile world intact. But that world was about to get much more complicated. The office building at 3 a.m. felt like a tomb. Security guards made their rounds in distant corridors while Ryan worked alone, the only light coming from multiple monitors casting blue shadows across his face. He'd sent the IT team home hours ago with instructions to return at 8. Some battles were meant to be fought alone. The attack was sophisticated, but it had a fatal flaw. It was too personal. Whoever orchestrated this had made it about Ryan specifically, which meant they'd left traces of their identity scattered through the code like breadcrumbs. He just had to follow them home. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling apart the attack layer by layer. Each line of code told a story. Each exploit revealed a choice. And slowly, inevitably, a picture began to emerge. The attackers hadn't just targeted Blake Technologies at random. They'd specifically gone after files related to military contracts. Files that Ryan's security clearance would have given him access to in his previous life. The elevator chimed behind him. Ryan didn't turn around, but he felt her presence like static electricity before she spoke. "Still here, I see." Cassandra's voice cut through the silence, different somehow in the pre-dawn darkness, less cutting, more human. "Your attackers made a mistake," Ryan said without looking up. "They got personal." His reflection stared back from the black monitor screen, stubble-covered, exhausted, but focused with an intensity that had nothing to do with janitorial work. Cassandra moved closer, her heels muffled by the conference room carpet. In the blue glow of the monitors, she looked younger, more vulnerable. The corporate armor was still there, but cracks were beginning to show. What kind of mistake? Ryan finally turned to face her, and something in his expression made her step back. "The kind that tells me they know exactly who I am. And why I'm here." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to voice. She sank into the chair across from him, her perfect posture finally showing signs of strain. "Ryan Hayes, captain actually, cyber operations, Fort Gordon, 3 tours in Afghanistan, Distinguished Service Medal, Purple Heart." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I know exactly who you are." The admission hit him like a physical blow. All these months he'd thought he was invisible, just another casualty of budget cuts and military downsizing, reduced to pushing a mop for minimum wage. But she'd known, had always known. Then why? The question came out rougher than he intended. Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the conference table's polished surface. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I owed you my life. And I couldn't figure out how to pay that debt without destroying what little pride you had left. The words hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. Ryan felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that went deeper than names and faces. In the dim light of the conference room, with the city sleeping 30 floors below, the past finally caught up with the present. Helmand Province, 2014. Cassandra's voice carried the weight of years. I was Major Blake then, intelligence officer. You pulled my team out of that compound when the Taliban overran our position. Her laugh held no humor. Saved my life and lost 3 of your own men doing it. The memory hit him like shrapnel, dust and gunfire, and the weight of responsibility crushing down on him as he'd made impossible choices in impossible circumstances. He'd tried to forget Afghanistan, tried to bury the ghosts along with his uniform, but some things refused to stay buried. You remembered me, she continued, her voice stronger now. Even covered in blood and dust, you looked me in the eye and said, everyone makes it home. And somehow we did. She gestured to the monitors around them. When I saw your application, I couldn't believe it. Captain Hayes, reduced to applying for custodial work. It was wrong. But I couldn't just hand you a position you hadn't earned. You would have seen right through that. Ryan absorbed this revelation, feeling pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. The job offer that came from nowhere. The way she watched him work. The challenge that should have been impossible for a janitor to meet. So you waited for a crisis that would force my hand? I waited for an opportunity to let you be who you really are, Cassandra corrected. Without charity. Without pity. Just you, proving to yourself that Captain Hayes isn't gone. He's just been cleaning floors for a while. The honesty in her voice was raw, unfiltered by corporate polish. For the first time since he'd known her, Cassandra Blake looked human. Vulnerable. Real. The Ice Queen facade had melted away, revealing something far more dangerous, a woman who understood exactly what honor meant. Ryan turned back to his monitors, but his focus had shifted. This wasn't just about keeping his job anymore. This wasn't even about proving himself worthy of her respect. This was about something bigger, about second chances and the weight of old debts, about Tyler sleeping peacefully 30 miles away, trusting his father to make the world safe. The attack originated from a server farm in Moldova, he said, his voice steady and professional. But the real controllers are here in the city. They're using this as a field test for something bigger. And his fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up network diagrams and attack vectors. Military precision, government resources. This isn't corporate espionage. It's reconnaissance. Cassandra leaned forward, her business instincts overriding personal revelations. Reconnaissance for what? Ryan's expression grew grim as data flowed across the screens. For targeting our defense contracts. Specifically, the new satellite communication system we're developing for Special Operations Command. The implications hit them both simultaneously. This wasn't just about Blake Technologies. This was about national security. The weight of responsibility settled around Ryan's shoulders like a familiar coat. He'd worn it in Afghanistan, carried it through firefights and impossible decisions. He'd thought he'd left it behind with his uniform, but some duties transcended retirement. Some battles followed you home. How long do we have? Cassandra's voice was steady, but Ryan could hear the tension underneath. The CEO was back, pushing aside personal revelations in favor of immediate threats. They've been mapping our systems for weeks, maybe months. Ryan pulled up network logs, tracing patterns of intrusion like a hunter following tracks. But they haven't found what they're looking for yet. The satellite communication protocols are stored in an isolated system, physically disconnected from our main network. Then why haven't they just broken in physically? Ryan's smile held no warmth. Because they can't get past building security without triggering alerts. But if they can crack our admin protocols remotely, they can override the security systems from the inside. He gestured to the screens around them. This whole attack is just a key to unlock the front door. The pieces were falling into place with military precision. Whoever was behind this had studied Blake technologies like a target, mapped their defenses, identified their weaknesses. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the Janitor. Ryan's fingers flew across the keyboard as he began to build countermeasures. This wasn't just about plugging security holes anymore. This was about turning the tables, using the attacker's own methods against them. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that the best defense was often a devastating offense. There, he said, pointing to a cascade of data flowing across the primary monitor. I've isolated their command structure. 3 main nodes, all communicating through encrypted channels. His voice carried the confidence of a man back in his element. I can take them down one by one, but I need administrative access to the core security systems. Cassandra was already reaching for her phone. What do you need? Root access to everything. No restrictions, no oversight. Ryan met her eyes across the conference table. And trust that I know what I'm doing. She didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved across the phone screen with practiced efficiency, entering authorization codes and bypassing security protocols that would have taken hours to navigate through proper channels. Done. The system is yours, Captain. The title hung in the air between them, acknowledgement and challenge in equal measure. Ryan felt something straighten in his posture, muscle memory older than his custodial career asserting itself. He wasn't just Ryan Hayes, the Janitor, anymore. He was Captain Hayes, defender of networks and keeper of secrets. The next hour passed in focused intensity. Ryan moved through Blake Technology's digital infrastructure like a ghost, invisible to the attackers still trying to map their defenses. He planted false trails and honeypots, digital decoys designed to waste their time and reveal their methods. Slowly, methodically, he began to close the net around them. Cassandra watched from across the room, her expression shifting from skepticism to amazement to something that might have been pride. This wasn't the broken veteran who'd applied for custodial work 8 months ago. This was the officer who'd saved her life in Afghanistan, competent, decisive, unshakable under pressure. Contact, Ryan announced, his voice carrying the calm authority of mission command. I've got a trace on their primary node. The attack is being coordinated from... He paused, reading coordinates that made his blood run cold. From a building 6 blocks from here. Industrial district. Warehouse registered to a shell company. The implications were staggering. The attackers weren't halfway around the world in some anonymous server farm. They were here, in the city, close enough to watch Blake Technology's windows glow in the darkness. Close enough to strike physically if their digital assault failed. Cassandra was already moving, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she paced. We call the FBI, Homeland Security. This is way beyond corporate security now. And tell them what? Ryan's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of experience. That we caught foreign agents based on the analysis of a janitor. How long do you think it'll take to convince them? How long before the attackers realize they've been made and disappear? She stopped pacing, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Then what do you suggest? Ryan stood up, his movements carrying the fluid precision of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions under pressure. I suggest we end this, tonight, before they can regroup or try again. His eyes met hers across the conference room. But I can't do it alone. The challenge was clear, not the corporate game they'd been playing for months, but something real and immediate and dangerous. Cassandra Blake, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, was being asked to trust her life to a man she'd known as nothing more than custodial staff. She didn't hesitate. What do you need from me? Administrative access to their building's security system, a distraction that'll draw their attention away from their computers. Ryan was already moving toward the door, his step lighter and more confident than she'd ever seen it. And backup, in case things go sideways. Ryan. Her voice stopped him at the threshold. When he turned back, her expression was serious, weighted with things that couldn't be said in corporate conference rooms. I meant what I said about owing you. But this isn't about debt anymore. He nodded, understanding passing between them like a current. No, it's about making sure Tyler has a safe world to grow up in. The mention of his son shifted something in the air between them. Suddenly, this wasn't about corporate espionage or military honor or even personal redemption. This was about a 9-year-old boy sleeping peacefully in a small apartment, trusting his father to keep the monsters at bay. 20 minutes later, Ryan crouched in the shadows outside a warehouse that should have been empty. Through grimy windows, he could see the glow of multiple computer screens and the silhouettes of at least 4 people working with urgent intensity. Professional setup. Military precision. This was exactly what he'd expected to find. His earpiece crackled with Cassandra's voice. Security system is down. You have a 10-minute window before their backup generators kick in. She was parked 3 blocks away in her Mercedes, monitoring police frequencies and providing electronic support. Not exactly military protocol, but it would have to do. Ryan moved like smoke through the building's shadows, his custodial uniform replaced by dark clothing that helped him blend into the warehouse's maze of equipment and shipping containers. The skills came back automatically. How to move without sound, how to read a room's tactical situation, how to turn industrial equipment into cover. The computer setup was impressive. Banks of servers hummed quietly, while multiple monitors displayed network diagrams and attack vectors targeting not just Blake Technologies, but defense contractors across the country. This wasn't a one-off operation. This was the beginning of something much larger. 4 operators worked with focused intensity, their conversations in accented English revealing origins in Eastern Europe. Professional hackers, but not just criminals. Their equipment was too sophisticated, their operation too well-funded. This had the fingerprints of state sponsorship all over it. Ryan's phone vibrated with a text message. Not from Cassandra, from Tyler. Dad, can't sleep. When are you coming home? The innocent words hit him like a punch to the chest. His son was awake, probably worried about homework or the math test on Friday. Normal 9-year-old concerns in a world that was about to become much more complicated. He typed back quickly. Soon, buddy. Dad's just finishing up some work. Go back to sleep. The lie tasted bitter, but some truths were too heavy for children to carry. The lead operator was speaking into a headset, coordinating with someone off-site. Ryan moved closer, staying in the shadows while straining to hear the conversation. The words that drifted back made his blood run cold. Blake Technologies secured, but Hayes is proving problematic. Yes, sir, we know about. Afghanistan. Recommend immediate escalation to physical assets. They knew. Not just about his military background, but about his role in tonight's defense. Worse, they were talking about escalation. In military terms, that meant only one thing: violence. Ryan's earpiece crackled. Status report. Cassandra's voice was tense with waiting. Compromised, he whispered back. They know who I am. And they're planning something bigger. He was already moving, retreating deeper into the warehouse shadows while his mind raced through possibilities. The operation was blown, but he'd gathered enough intelligence to understand the scope of the threat. Get out of there. Now. Cassandra's voice carried the sharp edge of command authority she'd learned as an army major, but Ryan was already moving in the opposite direction, toward the computers, toward the heart of the operation. Negative. I'm going to end this. Ryan, don't be stupid. We can call in the professionals now that we know where they are. And how long will that take? How long before they sanitize this site and disappear? Ryan was at the edge of the computer setup now, close enough to smell coffee and cigarette smoke. They mentioned physical assets. That means they're not just hackers anymore. The implication hung between them, unspoken but understood. Tyler was at home. Alone. Vulnerable. If these people knew about Ryan's military background, they knew about his family. And if they were escalating to physical threats... I'm calling the police, Cassandra said. Do it. But I'm not waiting. Ryan was already moving, his plan crystallizing with military precision. Take out their computers, grab whatever intelligence he could, get home to Tyler before anyone else figured out where he lived. The approach had to be fast and decisive. No time for subtlety or careful reconnaissance. Ryan burst from the shadows like a force of nature, his custodial training finally paying dividends in an unexpected way. He knew exactly how to move through cluttered spaces, how to use equipment as weapons, how to turn a warehouse into a battlefield. The first operator went down before he could even shout a warning. Ryan's elbow caught him behind the ear with surgical precision, not enough to cause permanent damage, but sufficient to end his participation in the evening's activities. Military training emphasized minimum necessary force, but necessary was a flexible concept when national security was at stake. The second operator was reaching for something that definitely wasn't a keyboard when Ryan's boot caught him in the solar plexus. The man folded like a cheap suit, gasping for air while his weapon skittered across the warehouse floor. 2 down, 2 to go. But the remaining operators were professionals. They'd scattered at the first sign of trouble, using the warehouse's maze of equipment for cover while they regrouped. Ryan could hear them coordinating movement, their voices sharp with tactical precision. These weren't just hackers anymore. They were soldiers. Federal agents! Drop your weapons! The shout came from multiple directions as tactical lights flooded the warehouse. Ryan flattened himself behind a shipping container, confusion warring with relief. The cavalry had arrived. But whose cavalry? Gunfire erupted from 3 different directions. Whoever these federal agents were, they weren't interested in taking prisoners. The warehouse became a shooting gallery, with Ryan trapped in the middle while automatic weapons turned computer equipment into expensive confetti. His earpiece crackled with static, and Cassandra's voice. FBI, 20 agents, helicopter inbound. The rest was lost in the chaos of tactical radio chatter and gunfire. Ryan stayed low and moved fast, working his way toward the computer setup, while federal agents and foreign operatives painted the warehouse walls with lead. The hard drives were his priority now. Whatever intelligence was stored on those machines could prevent this from happening again. A figure stepped out of the shadows ahead of him, rifle-trained center mass. Ryan recognized the tactical gear, the professional stance, the calm precision of someone accustomed to violence. But the face behind the weapon made his blood freeze. "Hello, Captain," the man said in accented English. "We've been waiting for you." The warehouse fell silent around them, gunfire replaced by the electric tension of a standoff. Ryan realized with crystal clarity that this had never been about Blake Technologies. This had been about him, about drawing Captain Hayes out of hiding and settling accounts from Afghanistan. "Yuri Petrov," Ryan said, recognizing the face from classified briefings. "I thought you were dead." Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Petrov's smile held no warmth. "But your men in Helmand were not so fortunate. Neither will be your son unless you prove cooperative." The threat hit Ryan like a physical blow. Tyler, alone at home, vulnerable. Everything else, the corporate espionage, the federal raid, even his own life, became secondary to that single, overwhelming fact. "What do you want?" Ryan's voice was steady, but his mind was racing through tactical possibilities. Too far from cover, too many angles of approach. And somewhere in the city, his son was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his world was about to change forever. "Justice," Petrov replied. "For 3 good soldiers who died because you chose to save an intelligence officer, instead of covering your own men." The rifle remained steady, centered on Ryan's chest. "You remember them, yes? Kowalski, Martinez, Thompson, they had families too. The names hit harder than bullets." Ryan remembered them all. Young faces full of conviction and courage, cut down in a hellish firefight while he'd made impossible choices in impossible circumstances. He'd carried their ghosts for years, wondering if he could have done things differently. But Tyler's face swam in his memory, innocent and trusting. Some choices were simple, even when they broke your heart. "I remember," Ryan said quietly. "And I'd make the same choice again." Petrov's finger tightened on the trigger. "I thought you might say that." The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the warehouse silence, but Ryan felt no impact, no burning pain of bullet wounds. Instead, Petrov spun sideways, his rifle clattering across the concrete floor. Behind him, Cassandra Blake stood with a smoking pistol in her hands, her face pale but determined. "Major Blake, United States Army," she announced to no one in particular. "Some debts are worth paying forward." The aftermath was chaos and paperwork in equal measure. Federal agents swarmed the warehouse while paramedics treated wounded operatives and crime scene technicians catalogued evidence. Ryan sat in the back of an ambulance, watching the sun rise over a city that had no idea how close it had come to catastrophe. Cassandra found him there as the adrenaline finally wore off, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion and the desperate need to see his son. She looked older in the morning light, worn down by a night that had stripped away corporate pretenses and revealed the soldier underneath. "Tyler's safe," she said without preamble. "FBI had units watching your apartment from the moment we identified the threat. He slept through the whole thing." Relief flooded through Ryan like warm water, washing away hours of tension and fear. His son was safe. That was all that mattered. Everything else was just details. The intelligence on their servers, he said. How bad was it? Bad enough to prevent a lot of good people from dying. Cassandra replied. The operation was bigger than we thought. Defense contractors in 6 countries, military communication systems, satellite networks. She sat down beside him on the ambulance bumper. You saved more than just Blake Technologies last night. They sat in comfortable silence, watching federal agents load computer equipment into unmarked vans. The warehouse that had been a battlefield was becoming just another crime scene, its secrets packaged and labeled for courtroom presentation. So what happens now? Ryan asked. Cassandra's smile was tired but genuine. Now you go home to Tyler. And on Monday, you start your new job as Chief Security Officer at Blake Technologies. She gestured toward the warehouse. I think you've more than proven your qualifications. The offer hung between them, laden with possibilities neither had imagined 12 hours ago. Captain Hayes had returned from his custodial exile, but the question remained, what did he want to do next? The salary might be a slight improvement over your current position, Cassandra added with dry humor. Enough to afford decent school shoes anyway. Ryan felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of pride and desperation that had been tightening for months. Tyler would have those new shoes. More than that, he'd have a father who could be proud of his work again. There's one condition, Ryan said. Name it. I want to set up a scholarship fund for military families dealing with financial hardship. His voice was steady, but Cassandra could hear the weight of memory underneath. Call it the Thompson-Martinez-Kowalski Memorial Fund. She nodded, understanding the significance without explanation. Some debts could only be paid forward, never back. Done. 2 weeks later, Ryan stood in his new office on the 20th floor of Blake Technologies, watching Tyler explore the space with 9-year-old enthusiasm. The boy was impressed by the view, by the leather chairs, by the computer setup that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Dad, is this really where you work now? Tyler's eyes were wide with wonder and pride in equal measure. This is it, buddy. Ryan knelt down to his son's level, straightening the boy's new school uniform. What do you think? I think it's awesome. Tyler paused, processing something with the serious consideration children brought to important questions. Does this mean we don't have to worry about money anymore? The question hit Ryan unexpectedly. For months, he'd tried to shield Tyler from the reality of their financial struggles, but children noticed more than adults gave them credit for. It means we're going to be just fine. Tyler nodded solemnly, then brightened with a child's resilience. Can I tell my friends my dad is like a superhero now? Ryan laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. I'm not a superhero, buddy. I'm just good with computers. And stopping bad guys, Tyler added matter-of-factly. That's what superheroes do. From the doorway, Cassandra watched the exchange with something that might have been longing. She'd knocked, but neither Hayes male had noticed her arrival. The scene was too perfect to interrupt. Father and son, planning a future that included new school shoes and college funds and all the security that had been missing from their lives. Sorry to interrupt, she said finally. But there's someone here to see you. Ryan. Tyler straightened up, suddenly shy in the presence of the important lady his father worked with. But Cassandra's smile was warm and genuine as she addressed him directly. You must be Tyler. Your dad's told me a lot about you. He has? Tyler glanced up at his father with surprise and pride. "He's very proud of you," Cassandra confirmed. "And I can see why." The visitor turned out to be a federal agent with news about the broader investigation. The warehouse raid had uncovered intelligence networks spanning 3 continents, preventing cyber attacks that could have crippled military communications during ongoing operations. Ryan's work hadn't just saved Blake Technologies, it had potentially saved lives in active combat zones. After the agent left, Ryan found Cassandra waiting in the executive break room, staring out at the city skyline with the contemplative expression he'd learned to recognize. She was processing something, working through implications with the methodical precision of someone accustomed to command decisions. "Regrets?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "About what? Hiring you? Trusting you? Shooting a Russian operative in a warehouse?" Her smile held a hint of the dry humor that had gotten them both through their military careers. "No regrets." "Even about the marriage proposal?" The question surprised them both. It had been meant as a joke, a callback to the challenge that had started everything. But in the afternoon light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, with Tyler's laughter echoing from the outer office, it felt less like humor and more like possibility. "That was a challenge, not a proposal," Cassandra said carefully. "Big difference." "Is it?" Ryan met her eyes across the table. "Because I'm pretty sure I won." The silence stretched between them, charged with implications neither was quite ready to voice. They'd been through war together, corporate espionage, warehouse gunfights, and federal investigations. They'd saved each other's lives and trusted each other with secrets that could topple governments. But sitting in a break room, discussing possibilities over coffee, felt like the most dangerous conversation they'd ever had. "Tyler would need to approve," Cassandra said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "Tyler already thinks you're pretty cool," Ryan replied. "He told me you're the prettiest superhero he's ever met." "Superhero?" "Apparently stopping bad guys makes you a superhero. He's very clear on the criteria." Cassandra's laugh was genuine and unguarded, the sound of someone who'd found something she hadn't realized she'd been looking for. "Well, if Tyler approves." "Is that a yes?" "That's a maybe," she corrected, but her smile took the sting out of the words. "Ask me again when you've been Chief Security Officer for more than 2 weeks. Deal?" Ryan stood up, extending his hand across the table. "But I should warn you, I don't plan on losing twice." Her handshake was firm and warm, carrying promises neither was quite ready to make out loud. "Neither do I." 6 months later, the wedding was small and private, held in the Blake Technologies executive conference room where they'd first worked together to save the company. Tyler served as best man, wearing a suit that actually fit and shoes that didn't let in rain. The ceremony was officiated by a retired army chaplain who'd served with both bride and groom in different capacities. The vows were simple and honest, spoken by 2 people who'd learned that love could grow in the most unexpected places. Ryan promised to protect and cherish, to be worthy of trust given freely. Cassandra promised to stand beside him, to face whatever battles came their way together. Tyler's contribution to the ceremony was a handmade card that read, "Welcome to our family, Mom. Dad says you're the best superhero ever, and I agree." The reception was held in the same conference room, with catering that was several steps above the usual corporate lunch fare. Federal agents who'd become friends during the investigation mingled with Blake Technologies employees who were still adjusting to their former janitor's transformation into their new security chief. During the first dance, Cassandra whispered in Ryan's ear, "So what's next for us, Mr. Hayes?" Ryan spun her gently, catching sight of Tyler at the dessert table, talking animatedly with other guests about his father's heroic exploits. The boy had gained confidence along with financial security, blossoming into the young man he'd always had the potential to become. "Next, we keep building something worth protecting," Ryan replied. "And we make sure Tyler grows up knowing that sometimes the good guys actually win." The music played on, and they danced surrounded by the life they'd built together. Imperfect, unexpected, and absolutely worth fighting for. Outside the windows, the city stretched away in all directions, full of people going about their lives unaware of the threats that had been stopped, the battles that had been won in corporate conference rooms and industrial warehouses. But in that moment, the world was exactly as large as a conference room, a small family, and the promise that sometimes challenge could bloom into something beautiful. The janitor had become a security chief. The Ice Queen had become a wife and mother. And Tyler Hayes had gained not just financial security, but a complete family. The fairy tale was real, built not on magic, but on courage, trust, and the simple recognition that sometimes the most important victories were the ones fought for the people you loved. Ryan Hayes had learned that lesson in Afghanistan, forgotten it during months of financial struggle, and rediscovered it in the most unlikely place imaginable. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Tyler approached his newly married parents with a question that carried all the weight of a child's need for certainty. "This means we're really a family now, right? Like forever?" Ryan and Cassandra exchanged glances over his head, communicating in the wordless way that couples developed when they'd been through battles together. "Forever," they said in unison, and Tyler's smile was bright enough to power the entire building. The challenge had been simple: beat me, and I'll marry you. The victory had been unexpected, discovering that some prizes were worth more than anyone could have imagined. And the marriage that resulted was built on the strongest foundation possible: mutual respect, shared danger, and the absolute certainty that together they could face anything the world threw at them. Years later, when Tyler was old enough to understand the full story, he would ask his parents about that night in the warehouse, about the choice between safety and doing what was right. And they would tell him what they'd learned through experience, that sometimes the most important battles were fought not for glory or recognition, but for the simple right to go home to the people you loved. The janitor had won the CEO's heart, but more importantly, he'd reclaimed his own identity and built a future worthy of his son's pride. The challenge had been about more than marriage. It had been about second chances, about the courage to be vulnerable, and about the recognition that sometimes love grew best in the fertile ground of mutual respect and shared purpose. And in the end, everyone had won something worth keeping.